So we make nonfiction, I believe, because we believe that there is a tremendous amount of power in telling people the truth. But we do live in a time where it seems that truth doesn't matter. And not just with the President of the United States. He didn't fall out of the sky. He came out of a culture and a climate of decades, centuries, of telling the big lie, whether it was how he treated our native people who were here before the white people, how this country was built on the backs of slaves, and everything that's been told since then. So I don't see Trump as some weird anomaly. He's just the next progression of telling that long lie. So here we are, people who most, I would say, don't have comfortable means by which to just do whatever we want to do to try and get the word out there. But I have been lucky because people bought a lot of tickets to my first film, which then allowed me to make the other films with the freedom and not have to worry about the financial end of it. So I'm probably alone on this stage unless, well, there is Rick with his trust fund, but I'm just kidding.
From Mansalona, Michigan.
Yes, from Mansalona, Michigan. So we are a part of a growing and very large group now of people who are using film, cinema, to tell these larger truths. And I'm very honored to have these 8 with me here on the stage this morning. We have many others here this week. I hope you get a chance to see these documentaries. I'm going to have them each quickly introduce themselves to you and tell you what film they're here with and maybe what else they've done or whatever, where they're from, favorite color, whatever. But we'll whip through this pretty quickly so we can get right into the discussion. And we'd like you to join us in this discussion here this morning. Rick Rowley.
I'm Rick Rowley. I'm here along with Jacqueline Sewin, a producer who's out there in the dark somewhere, with the film 16 Shots, which is about the police killing and cover-up of the murder of Laquan McDonald in Chicago. I've made, Jackie and I have over 20 years made, a dozen films, mostly inside of social movements. Well, initially inside of social movements that believed they were transforming the world. Then when the war started, we were war reporters for 10 years. Now we're trying to engage with what feel like the most important kind of reckonings that our culture is having. And that is, for us right now, feels like this reckoning around race and justice, this kind of blood knot of violence at the center of the American experience for 300 years.
And you were nominated for the Academy Awards for which film?
Oh, yeah, and I was nominated for an Academy Award for a film called Dirty Wars, which followed Jeremy Scahill, exploring the extremities of the global war on terror.
And when you say the war,
yeah. So
just because this war never ends, we know that that's what you mean, right?
Totally. Yes. Yeah. A war which continues today. So not just the battlefields that we know of in Iraq and Afghanistan, but we filmed in Yemen, Somalia, and the sort of the lesser known fronts of this war that continues to this day across Africa, the Gulf, Syria, of course, and beyond.
Barrick?
Hi, thanks, Michael. Barrick Goodman. I'm lucky enough to be here with 2 films, Slay the Dragon, about gerrymandering and voter suppression, with my co-director, Chris Durrance, who's not here right now, but is here. And the second film is on Woodstock Music Festival. It's called Woodstock, 3 Days That Defined a Generation. So thank you for having me at the festival. I've been making films for forever. My wife, Rachel Dretson, and I started a company 30 years ago, 25 years ago. Mostly I do historical documentaries. I made a film on the Oklahoma City Massacre and on My Lai Massacre and on other massacres in American history. We have made films for Frontline for years, all sorts of things. It's a wonderful way to make a living. It's a great profession for a dilettante like myself, but you know, increasingly I'm intent on making films about the political situation we're in. So Slay the Dragon was the first, and I hope to follow it with other similar films. But again, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Also, I would say I'm one of the few, like Michael, who is a working class filmmaker coming from a working class background, and I've never forgotten it, as you never have, that experience. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, and most of the work I've done is in and around Southwest Ohio, not all, but most. So here, there's a film that was filmed in 1970 when I was a college senior. It was my senior project, called Growing Up Female. And then another called Seeing Red, Stories of American Communists, that came out in 1983-84. And then the new film, which is called American Factory, and it just came out this year, and it's filmed at an old General Motors plant that closed, as so many plants are doing, have done and are doing, in the Midwest, in the heartland. Closed when the economy collapsed, which you all remember, in '08, and was bought, to all of our shock, by a Chinese billionaire entrepreneur who reopened the plant and manufactures automotive glass. So that's American Factory, and that's playing here.
We also have, in the festival this week, a sidebar honoring Julia's films. All of us, we consider her one of the real movers and founders of the modern day documentary movement. She's been a documentary filmmaker for 50 plus years, and I personally have been inspired by you since before I even thought of making documentaries, and it's a real honor to have you here.
Well,
from Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton, Ohio, and I would say I am
the Flint of Ohio.
It is. It's so similar, yeah, really. I'm just very inspired by Michael, starting with Roger and me on up. He really, I always say he was the punk rock kid who like busted open the documentary form. Wow. No longer a kid, but you know, yeah.
Stay with the kid part.
Yeah.
Joan Churchill.
Yeah, well, I would say, along with Julia, that we're probably the OGs here. I've been making films for 50 years. I'm basically a cinematographer, so I believe very much in the crew being the filmmakers. So trying to keep everything as low-key, as tight and small as possible, so that, you know, maybe there's 3 people. Sometimes you start out with a third person, which is very handy as an assistant who gets the releases and drives the cars, and then that person leaves after 6 weeks because we can no longer afford to pay them. And then it's just the 2 of us. I do the shooting. I've worked a lot with Nick Broomfield. We've made over 10 films together. And then I got married to Alan Barker, who's another person who does sound. I always married my sound men. And it's, you know, I would say it is a great life. I hate being a tourist. I want to find out about people, and I think you have to have a genuine interest in people. I'm here with a film that I made 35 years ago with Nick Broomfield. It's just called Lily Tomlin. And thanks to Michael and to Tia Lesson, somewhere out there, the film has been digitally remastered, and I'm very excited to see it on the big screen again. I have not seen it.
Well, we're happy to do that. We've helped a number of films here, or the people who support this festival have helped restore films, obtain films, especially sometimes from countries that are at times more oppressive than ours, and so I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're going to get a chance to see this. So thank you very much for being here and for all your years. So. Wad.
Good morning. My name is Wad Al-Khatib. I'm a Syrian filmmaker. I'm here for a film called Forsama with my fellow director, Edward Watts, and my husband, who's subject in the film too. The film speaks about 5 years of love war in Syria when we were there. And now we are refugee in London, in the UK. And we've been moving with the film since March, when we finished the film. The film, for me, is not just a film, it's my life. It's everything we went through in the most difficult and horror conflict around the world in this time. And I'm so proud that I could stand and make the story and share it around the world. I'm so happy that you are all like, it's 10 a.m. in the morning, and all of you really here, and exciting to hear all this great story from other great directors. I'm so happy. Thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you for making a beautiful film. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nanfu Wang. I'm originally from China. I came to the United States in 2011 with a scholarship to attend a graduate school. And that was the first time I saw documentaries, because I grew up in a poor village where TV was not available until I was 10, and documentaries were just not of media that we were allowed to see. So some of the first documentaries I saw were in 2011, and one of them was Sickle. And that was when I was like, oh, I never thought I wanted to make documentaries until I took a documentary class and felt really impacted myself by the films I saw. And I was thinking, remember, I want to go back to China to make a film about the healthcare there and how inadequate it was, because my father died when I was 12. And that was the first documentary idea, although it never happened. I did go back in 2013 and made my first film, which showed here in 2016, Hooligan Sparrow. Great. Yeah, thank you. And I'm here now with a film called One Child Nation. It's about the consequences of China's one-child policy. And I became a mother 2 years ago, so looking at the one-child policy through the new perspective of being a mom and looking beyond the propaganda of China's one-child policy and find out the truth, what really happened. And I wanted to apologize first because the film is showing now, so I might run to the Q&A in about like 10 or 15 minutes, leave the panel. So sorry about that.
Thank you for being here. Jeff Gibbs had his world premiere of Planet of the Humans last night at the State Theater. It was amazing response, and take it away.
Oh, we may be cute, we may be clever, but maybe we went a little too far, just a little bit, we humans, and that's kind of the story. And maybe it's a story reflecting it, assuming that most people here believe in climate change and environmentalism and that we're in some trouble, that maybe we've taken some wrong turns as an environmental movement. And this is a long journey making this, because basically I made another film first. I thought if I made a film about the downfall of nature and all the ecological disasters, that would wake us up. And I think I learned that I too had to question my own assumptions about what was going to save us and what we all understood. And we've talked about this over the decades, and just, the one thing I learned from you was that no matter what you think you've accomplished or finished or whatever, if it's not the right story and if it's not done, it's not done. And so I think I probably took another 10 years, 5 years, you know, to really spool this out and to come to grips with the movie we've really cemented the last couple of years that you see. So I'm from Flint, Michigan. You know, well, actually, I grew up just outside of Flint. We were too poor to live in Flint, so that's.
I think people in Michigan know Beecher, right?
Beecher, what's that?
Beecher School
I
District.
grew up in Flint Beecher, yeah, and then I've lived in northern Michigan for 20 years, so happy to be here. And thank you for having the courage to show my film these other films. I mean, it's tremendously, I don't know if any of you have went through this, but sometimes if you have a story that's challenging what everyone believes, it's difficult to even get anybody to show that. You would think the film festivals would be all over that, but that can be difficult if it doesn't fit in somehow with what they're, I'm sure they don't think that consciously, but you know, it's just been a very interesting process. So thank you for having the courage to do this festival and make it about documentaries.
Steve.
Hi, I'm lucky to be the partner of that lady down there, Julia Reichert. We've been making films now together for 20 plus years. When we became a couple, we vowed never to co-direct because it would mean the end of our relationship. But then we learned how to do it, and as long as we're not drinking and talking about the film, it goes okay. Or in bed, we don't talk about the film in bed, whatever we're working on. It's just a good life advice. But it's an honor to be on this platform with these amazing colleagues. We have learned so much from Joan Churchill, Julia, and I, and from Alan Barker about camera work, sound work, being small and present in the room. It's just an honor to be on stage with you, Joan. So, and thank you, Michael, for showing this new film. We made American Factory. It was 3 years of insane production and then a year of intense editing, and we're lucky to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's American Factory. It's a beautiful, powerful look at where we're at right now, industrial America. And thank you for making it. And thank you for all the work that you've done. And we'll take the fact that you've sat on the opposite side of the stage as not an indication of how it worked out with the co-directing.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Right. Right. All right. So let's get going. And why don't I just throw something out? Many of you, most of you, have made films about something that's going on right now in the present, something that we're grappling with. We don't see a lot of these documentaries being distributed. The ones that do get good distribution involve, I found where my father lived and went and made a movie about him. Me and my other two brothers got separated at birth, and or let's watch a guy climb a rock wall that happens to be a mountain and see if he dies, which is kind of like, if you like NASCAR, it's the same sort of thing when you're watching the movie, right? Because every minute you're thinking, oh, I don't want to watch this, please. Those are the movies that make it. We were talking yesterday on yesterday's panel about the documentaries over the last couple of years, and the ones that have, or a nostalgia film, history films, or something that wishes that Mr. Rogers was still alive, that makes us all long for a better time, or at least something that felt like a better time. That's not a criticism of those films. Those are wonderful movies. But the question I want to throw out here is, when you choose to make a film about something that's in the here and now, I think we were looking at the list of the, over the last 5 years, the documentaries that are shortlisted for the Oscars, that are voted on even by our own branch. Of the 15 films that are shortlisted, maybe 2 or 3 deal with a current American issue. Lots of films about how other countries, Americans going to other countries to show how they're messing things up. But very few that show what we do in the here and now and go at it with the camera and the microphone as a weapon for the people. That is rare. It's rare that it's recognized by our own fellow documentary filmmakers, and it's rare that it gets distribution or makes the kind of money I think it should make. So I throw that out to anybody who would like to respond to the fact that, and I think most people, those who have made a number of films, have also made the other films too, but it's when you choose to make this kind of film. I mean, the irony of just that you are here with this beautiful film about Woodstock, not the original Woodstock movie, but how Woodstock, and all this great new footage. And the film that you're here with also, Slay the Dragon, about how we passed a ballot proposal in Michigan last November to make it a crime to gerrymander and to set up a system to where this is going to hopefully end. So it's such a powerful film. So anybody here can start this discussion as to why you made this particular film that you've made, and why every voice in your head was telling you, don't do it, because no one's going to fund it, you're not going to make anything, no one's going to see it, and I'm not going to get an Oscar nomination.
Okay, I could start that.
Okay.
Or unless you want to.
No,
yeah.
please.
Well, so, you know, we live in Dayton, Ohio, and I mentioned the GM plant closed, and it was closed for years, and then this Chinese billionaire opened it again. And we got the opportunity, I won't go into detail, to actually have access to film in that plant. And it ended up being for 3 years. So a couple things on that. One is, we got access to everybody, the management, the owner, the workers on the floor. That was a first for us. You talked about the camera as a weapon, which that is kind of how I've seen it, except for this film.
Stunning access.
Amazing access. And when you get that kind of, I want to make one point but then another, when you get that kind of access and you have the ability to talk with management about what they're going through, the difficulties they're facing, why they don't want a union in there, why they hate the idea there's a union battle. You talk to the owner and you talk to him about the American workers, they just can't deliver. And you talk to the workers about, man, this thing is so hot, they make us work overtime, they don't train us on the job. In other words, you hear all the different points of view. As a filmmaker, I'm used to taking kind of a position, in a way, in a subtle way. This one, I felt like we realized we were on the inside of basically like in our own little town, in our own little factory of like 2,000 workers, of globalization, of what was going on globally with, you know, foreign investment in blue-collar America. What does that look like? And I think we felt for this film that we really should honor the access and the fact that we could talk to everybody, honor that access by listening to everybody and really balancing their points of view and making sure as an audience you understand everybody's point of view. That's a departure for me. And we were definitely filming as it was happening. And I think another thing that's tough, and I don't know if you guys feel this, is if you're on the inside of a huge global process, it's very difficult to stand outside of that and say, this is where it's going and this is what it all means. We felt, rightly or wrongly, that the best thing to do was to kind of present to the audience. I don't know if you've seen American Factory yet, but this is the complexity that we faced. And it's hard to evaluate which way it's going and who's right and who's wrong. So that was at least part of our challenge in making this film, which is 25, the location of the factory is 25 minutes from our house. We could drive there every day, set up our cameras and go on in, and just wade in and see what was going on and try to follow. It was like following a runaway train, really, wouldn't you say? Yeah, so I'm looking down to Steve there. But I want to definitely hear from Nanfu because you have to go.
Yeah. So tell us because you've made 2 films now.
3. It's interesting. 2 of them about China. One of them is about America. And to your question, the one about America is about America's homelessness and mental illness. And that one did not get even 1 cent of funding. It was probably like the subject matter itself is lack of funding for those two subjects.
But the two films you made about your country got American
Distribution.
Yeah.
But I also have interesting experience making the films about China. One was the first film, Hooligan Sparrow. They were distributed. So my perspective is more about China's influence in America. To a certain extent, I think because of the growing economy and how a lot of corporation companies and people outside of China wanted to have business with China and wanted to have the market. So I've seen the kind of self-censorship that was really alarming to me from people who are in the corporate level or individuals. So there were distributors, I remember during Hooligan Sparrow, told us that they wanted, like, they couldn't distribute the film because they are entering into China. And then when I was making One Child Nation, luckily this one, Amazon distributed it, and it was a difficult subject. It was politically sensitive. But when I was making it, part of the story is about adoptees from China who are adopted in American families. And we've interviewed a bunch of American families. And at some point, they told us, sorry, I can't be in this film because we cannot participate in any films that's critical about the Chinese government. We don't want to lose the access to go to China. We don't want to face the retaliation from China. And that's something that really surprised me because I understood the kind of censorship and self-censorship within China, people, the fear that they have for the government, but I've never seen it. The influence of China is so far-reaching that it could actually make people outside of China self-censor.
Have you had to deal with any retaliation in China or from China?
Yeah, for myself, absolutely. When I was making Hooligan Sparrow, I was interrogated by the national security agents for 5 hours, and they had to take my family, my friends, my college roommates, all to interrogation. And then they constantly, when the film was shortlisted for the Oscar, the government really freaked out. They started exert all the influence they could to try to silence me. They would ask my family to tell me they had been monitoring what I say in media, in conversations outside China. And I had a friend who worked for the central government, and luckily she was a friend, but her job, she told me, was she had a list of people that she's monitoring. She knows English. She studied outside at NYU, and then she returned. Her job is having the list of names and compile in the media what these people say in the media, and then translate back to report to her supervisor. And I was on that list.
Where do you live now? Do you live in China or do you live here in the U.S.? Where do you live?
I live in New York.
You live in New York?
Yeah.
And do you think you could live in China now after making these two films?
It's tricky to go back, especially right after I make a film. So for Hooligan Sparrow, I didn't go back for 2 years until I made a film about Americans' homelessness. Then they invited me back to show that film. And then with this One Child Nation, I'm not going back immediately. I figure I need to make another film that shows how bad America is. Then I would be allowed to go in.
That's great.
I don't know what ideas you could come up with while you're here.
A lot, probably.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that you've hung in there and had the courage to make these films.
Thank you.
And we really enjoyed the first non-American film that you made here when we brought it a couple years ago. And I'm really glad that you're here this week. And I hope you enjoy Traverse City and everybody treating you okay?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you.
All right. All right. Do you have to go now?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
right. So
Thank
let's
you
hear
so
it for
much.
Nan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's very interesting what Namfu, do you want to come here? Yeah. It's very interesting what Namfu said about her experience with the distribution and distributors. As you said about the camera as a weapon and the access and all these interesting points, as a filmmaker, when we start working in something, everything we were looking for, as important as the context and the film and the characters, it's also the money in the other way. In my situation, I was a student at Aleppo University. I've never knew how to use a camera or what even camera means. And especially in a very secure country like Syria, just to have a camera and work independent, that's kind of crime. So I started filming in 2011 when the revolution started. I was activist and at the same time trying to document with no title about am I a journalist, am I just an activist, or am I a citizen journalist? So it was all confusing things, and I don't know, I was just like keep filming and filming and filming. The fact that what I was thinking about, it's just this life is too short, especially in a place like Syria, where we lived under bombing, shelling, and a lot of other threatened things. So I just kept filming, and I was expecting that every minute will be the last minute. So I was just like, keep filming everything. We've eating, I'm filming. We've going out, there's really an attack on a place or anything. I was just like, keep filming without any idea about what I will do with this material. But I know that this is just very important, and this is what they will save all the story of Syria. And in 2016, we left, we were forced to flee out. And I had all my hard drives, and I was very care about them, like as much as I was care about myself and my daughter. I was just wanted to take this footage out because it means everything for us. It means everything we lost, everything we went through, and it's the only thing can really fight the propaganda outside. And I was lucky enough to take this material out. And at the beginning, I was very desperate about why I will do this. I worked at the news for 1.5 years, and my small reports were shown by millions of people around, and nothing really changed on the ground. So will documentary now will change something? I was very, have this question through the whole process, until we showed the film first time. I worked with Edward for 2 years. We were trying to make justice to the material, to my story. And we were lucky enough to have that collaboration and great team around us. And the story is political, and I wanted to be very political. I wanted to tell my story in a way that we've seen it. Maybe the people outside the channels will not accept this, but I said I could have been killed for this. So I will say it as I wanted. I will not think about anything around. And we were lucky to have this American distributor, BBSD, with us from the beginning that, okay, do whatever you want, and we will start to make that happen. BBS distribution with Frontline. BBSD?
Oh, PBS.
Yeah, PBS.
Yeah,
sorry.
Right. We've heard of that.
My English with the Arabic is
your English is incredible.
Yeah. So after 2 years of working on this in a very dark place, and just editing and come back to the film again and again, the first screening was at South by Southwest in Austin, and we had no idea about how the reaction will be from people. We knew that people will not see the film. We had all that questions about people are very tired from the Syrian story. People seeing the Syria story as something very complicated and very difficult. And people really doesn't care. Everyone around the world has their own problem. And just like we've been killed in Syria for 8 years, thousands of people, a lot of refugees, people really doesn't want to hear anything about Syria. And the story itself is very tough. We have a lot of blood scenes, people been dying, and at the same time we have a lot of joy and love and happiness in the story. So it was mixed between these two. And the first screening, I was just waiting how many people will leave before the film will be ended. And really, I was like very terrified about this is the story for me. I know how important is it, but I don't know how people will react for this. And since that time until now, we've went to many places. A lot of distributors around the world take the film. It's opening in many different places, and people react very well, even with all these challenging. So I know how others feel about their films, and if that's really doesn't have budget or distributors or distribution. But I felt this is the opposite. Like, it gives me a lot of hope that people around the world really care. And as a filmmaker, as a subject of the film, as my life itself, I felt that people really people really care, people really engaged, people hunger to make an action or to feel that there is something in this world we should stand for. And in every place we go to, and I'm waiting for today. It's a very special place for me, Traverse City, and I've never knew about the city before. So I'm very excited to see this audience, how they will react to the film. But I felt that in all this world, the documentaries and everyone who's here doing a great job, this is something give us hope and give us a lot of strength that we should make more. We need really, people are really hunger for something important. And it's not just about the crazy leaders of this world, but it's all about the people, about us, about all our dreams. And I feel that it's really something very good.
Thank you. Let me pivot my original question into a different question here, because you said something that really struck me, and it's something I like. If I'm invited to speak at a film school or whatever, I would usually not say this, but it's what I believe. I believe it about us as citizens in in our country, in a democracy or whatever. But you said that when you escaped, you took care to make sure that you had all the hard drives, and that you said, if I remember your words, you took as much care to protect them and to get them out as you did your own child and yourself, that those hard drives were as important as your lives. That sent a chill down me, but it also reminded me too that, and other people on the stage can speak to this, Rick has risked his life in the filming that he's done. Julia made a film in the early 70s called Growing Up Female, which was, I think, the first and seminal film about women and what we really didn't call feminism at that time, but it was so powerful for me as I don't know what grade in high school I was in, but it changed my life, our slogan of one film can change you, Growing Up Female, change you. But for young people in here to speak out like that or to make a film like that in that time was not something that was appreciated. And I think that to be a documentary filmmaker, if you're going to make these kinds of films, as Nan, I mean, the risk that she continues to take, that if you're not willing to take that risk, if you're not willing actually to put your life on the line, and isn't that the sense that we should all have as citizens right now? You know, is it that bad now to the point where would you risk your life to save this country? Would you risk your own lives to turn this away from the deluge that we are in and are heading more into? That a filmmaker would sit here and say that was so powerful. And I just sat here thinking, you know, first of all, not only I believe you're going to live, but but if you maintain this attitude, we are going to see some of the most incredible films from you in the coming years, because you are fearless and you'd be willing to risk your own life for the greater good of what you're trying to do. And I honor you for that, and I thank you for that. And I can't wait to see your next film. So.
I want to just add something. I believe that everyone around the world, if he goes for a really tough situation, you will see something you will never thought that it's inside you. And this is not me, really. This is like thousands of Syrians who did great things. This is thousands of people around the world, here in the UK, in every place. It just needs like a very tough situation, and you will see what you can do, really. You will never thought that you can do something. But
that's our hope. And there are those who join the French resistance and those who collaborate. And history, life, our world gets better because of those who join the resistance. And the progress we have made as humans, and step by step, inch by inch, has been because of the people willing to do that. You're one of those people. People on the stage are those people. Jeff has no idea what he's in store for in terms of what you're going to face because of what this film says. You are not allowed to say these things, and you are not allowed to rip off the mask and show the corporate control and takeover of our green movement. We don't want to hear that. And especially the people who fund it don't want to hear it. And they will do everything, I guarantee you, from my experience, to stop you. So I'm sorry to wreck your morning, but it was such a nice night last night, I know. But Rick?
Yeah, Michael, I think the question you started out with about the sort of the hegemony of this one kind of filmmaking that's a personal story of one person who goes back and is allowed to revisit, like that, I think that is the corporate takeover of the kind of radical filmmaking that that Julia, that Joan, that Michael, Steve, that you guys were doing. That the success that you built has made the market react and take over what they call the social issue documentary. And the way that system tries to get you to speak, tries to tell you that the only way you can speak is from your very isolated, individual, personal, bourgeois, subjective position, and that's the only spot you have. Jackie and I, we spent 10 years covering the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We made a whole lot of short films there that were from the perspective of Iraqis, Afghans, in Lebanon during the war in 2006, and none of them punched through. And what we finally did was we tried to use that framework. We used Jeremy as a character, an individual character who went on a journey and traveled through this, an American who took you through, and we used the narrative tool that allowed us to penetrate this market and make a thing that would sort of punch through. But when we started out, we told ourselves that we would never make a film that said the word I, that the only pronoun we would ever use is we. We rejected any reduction of this massive collective movement of history into an individual bourgeois subject, and we made films that worked in their space, right? But this is the terrain we're in, and Michael, you created it, right? You were the person who went back and revisited their town, the town that they grew up in, and made sense of it all. But you made sense of it in a way that opened it up, that didn't shrink it down into an individual, subjective, personal experience that was only your own. It opened it up and made it a big collective experience of everyone in America. I think that's the cultural struggle we have right now in the documentary filmmaking world, is that that form, right? Just the surface of that form is something that everyone is copying and that is very commercially successful now, with none of the content and none of the reach.
Can we up here, can we explain a little, can we go a little deeper into what we know? We know the code. We know what he is saying here. And, Well, that, but also the fact that there is a documentary culture that has kind of been established, and there are institutions, foundations, not so much distributors, but a little bit of that, that if you want to get your money, You have to, what's that new thing now, that not the action plan or the
impact and engagement strategy.
impact? What is your impact and engagement strategy? Now that sounds like a good thing to be concerned about. Because we all want our films to have impact. But I have noticed I don't know what to say. I don't know how to. Maybe nobody wants to get into this because these are the people that fund your films. But I don't know if I like where things have headed here. And who's got the courage to say? I can say it because I don't need any of that system. But so if you want me to say it, I'll say it. But I'd like to see if anybody else up here would be willing to say it.
I like to play contrarian a little bit.
Or tell me I'm full of shit.
It's a lot to give a filmmaker $1 million or $750,000 to make a film for which there's very little chance of a return. So, in defense of the funders of our documentaries, two sets of filmmakers up here are funded by the same organization, Participant Media, which is an organization that is generally about social change, I would say. They don't have a high expectation of making their money back. They fund a number of wonderful films that you've probably heard of and seen. It is hard to get someone to fund a film for which there isn't a clear both return on investment but also impact. Documentaries have a not very measurable sort of impact, so it is an act of faith. That said, I completely agree with the sentiment up here. It's very hard to get funding for films that take on social issues directly. What's genius about the work that Michael does is that it punches through because it entertains at the same time it informs and changes people's mind. But that's a very hard trick to pull off. Michael's unique in that way. A lot of our films are not immediately accessible, or they are, but they're not if you put them on a marquee, people are not going to line up to see them necessarily. So it's difficult. I have empathy for the folks who fund our films. It's really an audience issue as much as anything else. We need audiences to, I think the American audience, generally wants their entertainment spoon-fed to them in a certain way. This audience notwithstanding, people are resistant to serious documentaries. There's a thing that they have to get over to go see them, and Free Solo and Mr. Rogers are much more accessible in that way. So I do think it's a problem of funding. I also think it's a problem of sort of our entertainment culture in general, and documentary finding their place in that landscape.
So you say the word entertainment like, sort of a kind of a dirty word. And this is the thing I've tried for years. I thought after Roger Me there'd be 100 films that would just go for it. And I was shocked that there weren't. And I've never understood. I mean, I didn't start out saying I'm going to make an entertaining film. I just thought that, it's like Jeff and I. We've been putting together all the rules for documentary filmmaking, and rule number 1 is don't make a documentary, make a movie. If you want an audience to see it, you should make it as honor the form you're using. You're making a film. Make a movie. Make a movie that's entertaining. I don't know, is Schindler's List entertaining? It's one of the most popular, highest box office films. Sophie's Choice, there's an entertainment film for you. I mean, but yet, if you want to use the word broadly in the sense that could I not get out of my seat because I hadn't read the book at the end of Sophie's Choice in that theater because I was so devastated by it? That is when movies do their real job. It's not just, silly stuff or goofy stuff or, comedy.
But movies are with one protagonist so often. And what you were speaking to is funders want you to choose one of your protagonists. And yet social change, the world gets better when we organize, when we get together as a group. And like some of us try to make movies about many protagonists, and the funders come to us and say, no, that one over there, make that one your lead character, everyone else can be a supporting character. And there's this tension between, and as Barrick was saying, it's like the funders want the films to reach the widest audience. Stories with one protagonist go further, just, statistically. and there's always this push-pull, right? But I think what we can do, if we have a situation where multiple, like a struggle of a community can be the community can be the protagonist, it still has to be a movie, it still has to be entertaining and forceful as a story, but I don't think we should ever say, like, just pick one.
I feel if I made Roger and Me now in the system that is growing up around funding documentaries, I would be told, focus on that bunny lady. Just follow the bunny lady all the way through the film, you know? And
that would be a great film. I mean, you know.
Actually, now that I think of it, actually,
I would fund that. Totally.
But but when there's multiple characters, how many films, documentaries have we seen where they follow 5 people through the competition of the National Science Fair or the Spelling Bee or whatever? And we're not really being honest with the audience, not saying me in that, but of telling, how did the filmmaker know that these 5 were out of the literally millions of kids participating in spelling bees across the country, we're going to end up in the national championship? And the public doesn't, they think the camera was there at the beginning. The filmmaker's gone back after they've been in it to film it and not mention that the subject that they're talking to already knows they've already been to the national whatever. I don't mean to pick on the spelling bee film. I don't even know if that's the case. But I'm just saying we know as filmmakers the tricks here they're being used, and then it's so inauthentic at that point. And I just, what you said, Steve, I just boy, I don't know. I think even like if you did the multiple characters, they're like, you know, yes, you've picked your 5. Now let's see which one will lose their job at the Dayton factory, and which one will go on to become the chairman of the board or whatever. It's just so you know, which I'll pivot to the next part of this.
Can I just jump in for a second? Because you've raised so many issues. I don't even know where to begin, but I want to go back to where you were talking about making these films in a timely manner. And, you know, so much of what we do requires funding. It takes a long time. By the time the film is finished, it's about the past. And I think what Wad was doing is that she was sending her material out as it was happening, and it was seen by millions, and it had a tremendous effect. And you know, what we have to do now is we have to make a film that's entertaining, that's positive, that people want to see, that wraps it all up in 3 acts. And by the time the film's finished and people actually see it, it's something that happened way in the past. And I think this is why things like Vice or, you know, people that are putting their material out as it's happening is so important. And that's, you know, why we make documentaries, to try to show the world what's happening, right, as it's happening. Yeah. So we're stuck in this paradigm that prevents that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the first thing that you brought up, and I'm very sleep deprived. We finished our film at 4 in the morning before the screening. I think that's when we wrap things up, right? But one of the things with Planet of the Humans, it's a struggle, I think, conceptually, and it's a struggle for funding, and it's a struggle, is to take the perspective outside of where we're at as a culture or a civilization or a species. And as daunting as that is, I think these things are connecting in ways that we don't understand. I think there's specific reasons for what's happening in Syria, in Iraq, and, you know, all around the world. And you know, when pirates are roaming the seas off the Somalian coast because they're out of fish, because we've consumed all the fish in the ocean, because we have giant industrial fish trawlers scraping the bottom of the sea for our own food, for the sushi bar, for our cat food, for our dog food, for more food to put into the salmon farms to grow fish, that we don't even realize we're out of fish. And so we're in this time when we're really lacking perspective, and that includes me. And it's really hard when you go into therapy, recovery, marital issues, to step outside and really see ourselves for who we are. And I think that's a challenge. And for me, what you said about the difficulty getting distributors and funding and the happy films, we have these films out like this amazing, was it the Planet Earth series? It's all this wonderful footage that then they slip in the message, oh, by the way, all these animals are dying, they're in trouble, but they just spent 2 hours showing you how beautiful it is, and that's a lie. That is a lie. It's the truth, it's a lie. But we're part of that lie, because I think things have evolved where, you know, as things get more stressed, and I really believe we're in the time we're approaching civilizational collapse. I hate to say that. That is in our near future. And we all get crazier, not just the right, but we do too. And I think we've been avoiding the darker stories. We've been avoiding looking at the big picture. And so this is a co-created world we live in which we've fallen for illusions ourselves. It's easy to see the other side believing, oh, we're going to find more oil, you know, we're going to have more magic, this and that. We don't, but our own magical thinking is very hard to discover. So I don't know what that all means, but when we see Trump and then these other right-wing people being elected, when we see the desire for only positive, happy stories, you've got to think positive, right? Where's your solutions? This is what happens when civilizations begin to unravel. We all live in more fantasies. And I think the trick for us is, can we look at ourselves and wake ourselves up and collectively begin to bring, you know, the only hope is reality therapy. On the other side, there's some relief and joy. Even if we know that we're kind of doomed and screwed, once we understand the true state of the war that we're in and what's happening, there's a kind of freedom that occurs. And so I think what we're doing is so important, and for us to actually step it up and begin to realize that everything that's happening is connected. And we're a global civilization. Civilizations last, one person interview told me 30 years. How long did the Soviet Union last? Decades, not centuries. You know, we don't realize that we're in this large story that connects all of the things that we're all working on here. And I hope there's more of a chance in the future where we can spend some time. I don't know what it would look like, a think tank or something, but there's not even a mechanism for us to all get together and connect these pieces. It doesn't exist in the environmental movement. Where is the planning for what's happening with the totality of humans on this planet? We're trying to solve climate change, great. But that discussion doesn't even exist. And so, I don't know what we're going to do, but it really is truly up to people that come from the harsh places where people are dying and suffering and working themselves to death. We've got to be the resistance, because nobody else is going to do it. And the billionaires and bankers are not going to fund the films that are going to change the world. We got to do it. So, right. Find our own way. So anyways, that's my...
Anybody else want to add anything before we turn it over to the audience?
On that happy note.
No, it's, yeah, it's...
I want to just thank you for this, because it's really what we need all to do. Just focus of what we want to, what's our story and what we want to focus on, without any other, caring about where's the money and how we can get it or whatever. And just part of what when we were doing for Sama, we moved for Ed place. He lives in church. He's making gardener for church. So we moved to the church and we stayed editing there for more than 5 months with no money, with nothing. And we were just in darker place, and the church is gonna fall. It needs 6 million to recover the church. So it doesn't matter. We left the place where we were editing. We stayed there for 5 months, just focusing on the story as we wanted to be, and just forget about everything. We knew at that moment that maybe no one will see the film. We wasn't even care that the story will be ended, or is that when we will make the film, our executive producer and other people will say, yeah, go for this. We had no idea about what the film will be at the end. But we just were, okay, we believe in this. We need to tell the story as this. And now it's out. It's out, and everyone around the world wants not just to see, but to buy the film. And just something, people, when they feel that this is a true story, this is something close, this is something we should care about, and it's affected our life and our future, people will be really care about that. So just thank you for your
Thank you.
comments.
Civilizations
It's really
and
not.
societies do not survive unless people risk their lives and everything they have to do something. So thank you.
Thank you.
The first thank you. The first line that appears on the screen in Barrick's film about gerrymandering, it comes on the screen in black. All democracies die. And it's the quote from John Adams about how there is no guarantee in the Constitution or any piece of paper that a democracy is going to survive. And so before I open it up to you, let me just posit this, that if our civilization does make it for another 50 years or 100 years, I wonder what they'll think of this time, and I wonder what film schools will teach about us in terms of the films that we made during this dark era. We had a man that ran for president who thought he was going to lose. In fact, if you remember Trump's thinking, because he's so full of himself, he was absolutely certain he'd win the popular vote. But the Clintons and the Democrats and the others would steal it from him with the Electoral College. And he made that speech to warn and to tell his followers, you remember this? My Second Amendment friends, be ready, because they're going to steal this election. They're going to steal this election. He was so stunned that he won that night. Just as I showed in Fahrenheit 11/9, when when your camera's back there with them, it follows them out onto the stage for the acceptance. They all look so stunned or glum because, you know, having to move to a 300-year-old house in a majority black city was not his idea of, you know, Mar-a-Lago on the Potomac. Anyway, so he wins, but he doesn't give it up. He says, because he couldn't stand the fact that she won by 3 million votes. So what did he say? 3 million illegal aliens voted. And he set up that commission to stay, because he wanted to make this clear, the illegals, and he was setting the path for what's going to happen in 2020. His fear of really losing in 2020. The chance that if Trump loses, that he won't leave the White House exists. The fact that he might declare martial law and say this was a stolen election, these were illegals who did this, that possibility exists. If you don't think it does, then you don't know the history of the last 100 years. In another very intelligent, progressive country, what will be written about us in 50 years' time that, I don't mean to attack, I don't want to sound like I'm attacking this film, because it really is a movie. If you want to see a great movie, watch Free Solo. But it has been recorded that the filmmaking community, both documentary filmmakers and the greater academy, decided in the first year of Trump to say that this was the best documentary to climb the face of a mountain. And I bet if I did the research, if we went back to whatever awards they were handing out in Germany in 1934, in 1935, they'd love this kind of film. And yes, Triumph of the Will, to show the strong German climbing the wall and making it to the top. Yes. What was that, 37, right? Triumph of the Will, something like that. All right. Aren't you guys professors? Come on, help me out here. I'm just saying, though, that is how this, as far as documentary films, will be remembered in the time of Trump. And that must not stand. And we must support each other and other filmmakers who are making the difficult and dangerous and urgent films right now. That it is the artists. If you look at any resistance, any revolution, it's the artists who are always on those front lines. It's why they come after the poets and the artists first in a dictatorship, to silence them. Why? Because the people love their poetry. Why? Because the poetry is entertaining and it's telling the truth. And I think that's how I see the time that we're in. And that's the sense of, that's why I'm so honored that all the films that have been made here by the people on this stage that you've joined me here in Traverse City. The people here are grateful that you've made these films, and grateful to the people who put up the money to let you make those films. And we've all made various deals with various devils at some point in time. But I'm grateful for Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu. You know, last night I missed the latest episode of Handmaid's Tale. Talk about a documentary. But so there are these things that exist that can help us. And if you've met some of the people, you must have, because Netflix is distributing your film, and who else has got a streamer that's helped them out here?
Fu has Amazon.
And Fu has Amazon. So, you know, I know people there. They're really good people there. There are people there. But when Warner Brothers asked me to come meet with them, Roger and me, and I sold it to them. But I got pulled aside by one of the vice presidents, and she says to me, "Now, don't tell anybody this." I think I can tell. The statute of limitations is over now. She said, "But I was a member of SDS, and the Port Huron Statement was my manifesto when I was in college. And I am going to get this film distributed here by Warner Brothers. And there is somebody in all of those organizations, and maybe more than one, that are fellow travelers. And that's why you are able to see our work in some ways. And why I believe that you will have distribution, simply because it's one of the great flaws of capitalism, that if there's a way to make money off it, even if it's against their own best interest, they'll put the money up sometimes for it, because they're counting on this audience here to do nothing. So yeah, go show your film, Jeff, but don't worry. They know that Americans will not get up off the couch. And it's my belief that they have made a bad bet, and that people will rise up and will not let this happen. Unfortunately, twice they've seen the candidate who won the election, twice,
Right.
in 16 years.
Right.
They know that our side, we're a bunch of wusses, and we're lazy, and we don't think about the things we need to think about. Their side, why I admire the right so much, is they have the courage of their convictions. They are relentless. They don't stop. And do you think for a minute, had it gone the other way, that Trump just would have tucked his tail between his legs and gone back to Trump Tower? No way. No way. But they know that we are Gore and we are Hillary, and we'll be that way again. Except for the moment when it happens when we won't. Except when we've said, okay, I've seen enough, that's it. And I hope our films help light that spark. I now turn it over to questions from the audience. Yes, right there on the aisle. Just shout it out. Here comes the microphone.
Oh, hi. How does someone, I'm not in the film industry whatsoever, but there's someone that needs to have her story told. It was a suburban middle-class mom who came down with, or has an illness, and she had to end up turning to prostitution to come up with money to pay deductibles for insurance companies. Then when that wasn't enough, she had to forfeit custody of her children, live in her car traveling the country to try and get help. How would someone reach out to a documentary filmmaker or someone that would take that on?
Nobody will.
Okay.
Nobody will make that film. I don't mean that really, but,
Oh, no.
but somebody might.
Okay.
But really nobody will. That's how you have to think of it. You have to make that film. Right. Where's my camera? It's in my pocket here somewhere, right?
Right.
You all have a camera.
Yeah.
Some of you are better with it than others.
Okay.
If you're not good at it, you know a millennial.
Okay.
No, but you have to film these stories.
Okay. I have proof of everything for this woman, paper trail, all that.
Give her a camera.
Okay.
Let her film her experience.
I
Okay,
agree,
she
totally,
has.
yeah. That's what you need to do.
She has done that.
Yeah. What? So what? Like where?
Talk to me afterwards.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for giving her voice.
Thank you. This morning has been really interesting. But I want to just add a little pessimistic note here. Everything is contestable. Ideas have become blurred and contestable. Philosophies have been blurred and contestable. Words mean nothing because they're all contestable. Even your images are contestable, debatable, put asideable, all the rest of it. Even our legal system now is contestable because there's no truth. You started out by talking about truth. The only thing that seems to be uppermost in this country is wealth. And wealth equals security, and that's illusory, but that seems to be the one dominating factor. Now my question is, how do you people continue making these fantastic documentaries which don't seem to have much impact because they're all contestable anyway, and the ideas in them are contestable? How do you retain your positive attitudes and your drive to continue doing this?
I mean, could I? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I could answer
Which
that
one
also.
wants to start by describing our insanity first?
Well, no, what you started out saying, that everything is contestable, I think is at the core of what we do. I mean, the film we're here with, 16 Shots, is about the police murder of Laquan McDonald in Chicago, which was captured on video, dash cam video. It took a lot of struggle to get that video released, but it is completely clear. Every second of the officer's interaction with Laquan is there. It's the camera's in a locked position. They're walking on, there's lane markers painted on the road, so it might as well have happened on graph paper. You can see every detail of it. It is incontrovertible, except it isn't. Because the truth is not something that's out there in the world. The truth is something that has to be fought for. So what our film is, an illustration of this point that you're making right now. It is an investigation of the way that the moment one of these, the way that this is not a battle of facts, it's a battle of stories. The Chicago police shoot a civilian every week or every other week, forever. Thousands of shot civilians in my lifetime. We know about none of them. The minute someone's shot, a story is told by the city. And that story carries a lot of weight and has a lot of machinery behind it. And there's a whole machinery that enforces silence around the corners of that and that shouts down anyone who says anything else. The reason why this one case punched through isn't because we had better facts. It punched through because there was a movement of people in the streets who refused to turn the page and look away. They stayed in the street for 4 years. And at the end of 4 years of struggle, I was there in front of City Hall when the verdict was going to be read. And there were 150 activists there. Most of the people were at the courthouse, but 150 activists were in front of City Hall listening to the verdict on their cell phones because they knew it was going to be not guilty. It was a majority white jury, no question. No officer in a 180-year history of Chicago police had ever been convicted of murder for killing a black citizen. So we're sitting there, and our plan is we're all going to go in and get arrested afterwards inside the courthouse, lock it down. And when they read the verdict through, 16 counts of guilty, one for every shot, people were weeping in the streets because something unimaginable had happened. A tear had been opened in the fabric of political reality through which they were able to imagine a completely different future. And they were the ones who opened that tear. So that's, our films don't change the world. Facts don't change the world. Movements of people change the world, and our films are successful when they become a tool or a weapon in the hand of a movement that is going to make that change.
Could I just answer that also?
Yeah.
That's a great statement. You said something, why do we do this? Part of it is our unending curiosity about the world and about people. But part of it is because sometimes we get to pull the covers off of some kind of social process or some kind of fact out there that most people just don't realize but has an immense impact on how we think and what happens in reality. And I always feel I must say this based on American Factory and what we learned there. Okay, I do come from a union family. If you think about it, what is the voice for working people? What voice do they have? And it is through unions, through organization, through having a collective voice. And we all know that the union density has gone way down. And we just assume, well, it's because unions are bad, right? That's why they've gone down. Well, what we learned and what you see very clearly in our film, without anyone stating it directly, because it'll be the organizations that will use the film afterwards who will use this to show the case. What you see is that $1 million or more is spent on a union avoidance or union busting company, which comes in and intimidates people, frightens people, confuses people. The company fires people who wear a union t-shirt or speak about the union, get fired. And Michael talked about the importance of democracy. Do we really have democracy? And we believe in fair elections. When you see our film, or if you hear about a union election, whether it takes place in Georgia or Tennessee or Dayton, Ohio, you have to ask, was it a fair election? Were those workers really allowed to use their conscience and vote the way they want? Or were they afraid that if they voted for the union, they might get fired, they might not get promoted, et cetera, et cetera? You see that exactly happening. And I'm very proud that we were able, as you're proud, to be able to pull the covers off that and let you see how that works in a particular plant. And that is part of American history that we don't realize. This is something going on for the last 3 decades, kind of secretly. The union busting folks were absolutely like, you cannot film us, you cannot film anything we do, you cannot film any of our literature, any of our meetings, and we did anyway, but as you will see. But it's a secret process in American workers' lives, that there's not free and fair elections at the workplace.
Who else would like to answer the man's question about why do you do this?
I'll give it a shot. I mean, I think your question is right on the money, I think. I mean, this is to me, the great revelation of the Trump era has been the assault on institutions that I grew up just believing were rock solid, democratic institutions, small d democratic. But what we realize, and the founding fathers, of course, knew this, is that they're only as strong as our collective investment in them, our belief in them. And I think what we've seen is that one wing of one political party has essentially said, we're not buying in anymore. We're not buying into the idea of one person, one vote. We're not buying into the idea that, small d democracy is something to hold on to and fight for. We think power is more important, and any means necessary to hold that power is justifiable because our ideas are better than their ideas. I've had people say that to me. So this is about stories. This is about holding on to what we believe is the truth with everything we've got. And I don't just mean we up here, but everybody who believes that what this country really is a set of ideas. It's not a border. It's not a physical space. It's an idea, and that idea is under extreme, assault right now, and it's in great jeopardy. And really, why we do what we do is because we believe that there is something called truth, and there is reality, and that's, I think, the fight that we're all in right now.
Okay.
I just wanted to say one thing about the impact. 10 years ago, there was a movie made called Capitalism: A Love Story, and where the word socialism was mentioned. I think socialism is part of the discussion now, part of this cult. So, impact is not measurable in a certain way, but I look at some of what we're doing as what I would call ruining people's drinking. I used to work with people in recovery, and sometimes there's not an immediate impact, but something will stick with a person that creates change over time. And so, we have to do this, whether it makes a difference or not. I think good people have to do the right thing, no matter what the outcome of that is. But I do think in the long run, only stories can change the world.
13 years ago, I met a professor, an unknown professor at Harvard. Her name was Elizabeth Warren. And I asked her if I could interview her for Sicko. So this is 13 years ago. And she got me thinking about this idea of the 1%. I'd never heard that before. And so I started using it in Sicko and then in Capitalism, A Love Story. And then 2 years later, Occupy Wall Street happens. But part of why I keep doing this is the hope that it sparks something, or it can be a small contribution to moving things forward. And if it doesn't or it isn't, then I wouldn't do it anymore. I'd think of some other way to participate as a citizen. But I think I still do this because there are two things that are etched in my mind as a teenager in Davison, Michigan. One is that 9 boys from my high school came back in a box, sent there by this government to kill people that had never done anything to us, and then were sent home. For many years I didn't stand, and then finally I had to start standing at Tiger Stadium because they poured beer down me, my back. So I started standing for the national anthem after about 10 years, but never sang it again. That's for damn sure. On a Thursday night, coming out of Mass, Catholic Mass, Thursday before Palm Sunday, some dad had gone out to warm up the car, left after communion. We're all coming out of the church, and he shouts out to all of us, hundreds coming out of the church, they've shot Martin Luther King. And a cheer went up amongst this all-white congregation. Not by all of them. I don't even think a majority of them. But just enough of them as an 8th grader for that to sear in my head. And I didn't know what I would end up doing at that time. I wouldn't make my first film till I was 35 years old. But that was with me the whole time of thinking, what is it I can do?
Right.
And how can I do something with it? And it remains with me as I sit here and tell that story on this stage. But I'm also a human being, and I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to just give up and go, join Ice Capades or something like that. So, next, who's got the next question? Yes.
Yeah.
Can't see you. Whoever's got the microphone, go for it.
Down front.
What I really appreciate is, the theme in the past was one movie can change you, and that it's, now one movie can change the world.
Just for this year.
The bottom line is the 7-Up series, which you were very grateful to show for free back in 9, at the Film Festival 9.
And Michael Apted.
And I, by the way, I like the White Album undertone on, 9 or whatever. I would like to ask the panelists, what do they think of the 7-Up series, which Roger Ebert put on his top 100 list before he passed away?
That's great.
It's a landmark. The 7-Up series is a series of documentaries that started in the 60s following a group of kids who are now probably 65, 70 years old. And
There's a new one coming out.
Yeah, and the filmmakers go back to them every 7 years and check in on their lives. It's a remarkable, 60 years in the making documentary. And it speaks to the power of images, just seeing those faces and those lives get older. But it also, what it connects me to is what you were saying about contestability and what Rick was saying about the fact that there were images of, think of how many people of color have been shot by the police. Unless you have images, there's not even a chance of justice, and only rarely is there justice. But without images, the power, so like we're up here, you're sitting there, but we all have cameras, as you were saying, Michael, and it's like, if we see someone pulled over by the police, we have a responsibility to pull out our camera and make sure nothing funky's going on, and our cameras are tools, or if you could say weapons, a tool might be a more benign way to say it, but it's like...
It's a more Gandhi-esque way of saying it, yes.
It's something that we have to use because it has power, and if we care about making the world more just, we have to use it.
Who's next?
So just one other short thing. That's the power of documentary, that you can do things over a long period of time. It's just an invaluable document.
Yes. Yes.
Hi. I'm not too familiar with the process of film distribution, but I was wondering, for a documentary filmmaker, what considerations do you take into account when trying to get your film distributed, and what's that process like?
Have all day?
Well, for me, I don't know about other people, one of the most important, in fact, probably the most important thing is that we, the people who made the film, and understand what we want it to do in the world, that we retain control of the distribution side, because that includes the impact side. That includes things like how much does it cost for some group to show the film, let's say. Who does it get promoted to? Who finds out about it? So that's very important to me is, you know, I guess the other thing is that whoever's distributing it, and by the way, I'm part of a co-op called New Day Films, which is a group of men and women, actually, although more women, who do our own distribution because we want to have control over it. We want to reach our audience. We want to make sure that happens. So that's, from my point of view, that's really important.
I want to just add, like, because the distributor will present the film to audience. Like, whatever you've did inside the film in your, like, opinion or things or the story that you want to tell, but the distributor who's the one who will, like, tell the people, this is the film about something. So if you don't have that control and relationship between you and distributor, you will, like, literally lose what you want to present to the people. So it's something very, very important to be also, like, as you mentioned, it's all about how you can, as a filmmaker, still part of the distribution like journey.
And the devil is in the details. Netflix, which owns your film, you no longer own it, will get that film seen by more people than you could ever do yourself.
You also, I learned this from reading Spike Lee's book when I was making Roger and Me, that a lot of times filmmakers just don't ask for things when they're doing their deal with a distributor, and you'd be surprised what you can get. So I was very nervous about selling my film to Warner Brothers, a Time Warner company, with Roger and Me. And so in the negotiations, I just sat there and said, you know, there's 4 families in the film that are evicted in Flint. I want, as one of the deal points of the contract, that you pay their rent or their mortgage for the next 2 years, so they got a cushion to try and, you know, come back. They said yes. Then I said to them, I want you to make the film, anybody who comes up to any box office in any theater with an unemployment card, current unemployment card, they get into the film for free. They said yes. I'm like, wow, I'm on a roll. What else could I get?
Right.
And it's like, and then I said, the film cannot be shown in any country that practices apartheid. And they said yes. And then that caused a whole kerfuffle later, because when it was sent to the Jerusalem Film Festival, I asked them to, because the subtitles they were going to put it in was Hebrew and French. And I said, no, they have to be in Hebrew and Arabic. And they said no. And then I said, well, I'm not coming. The jury gives it the prize of the winner of the festival. And, but there's all this animosity in the Israeli press toward me for saying what I said. Also, they wouldn't do any showings in East Jerusalem, where the Arabic population lives. And because there was a curfew, Arabs from Bethlehem around could not come into Jerusalem to watch my movie. So to me, that's apartheid. I'm out. And the next year at the Toronto Film Festival, the director of the festival sees me, and she's coming toward me, and I'm going, oh no. And she came up and she gives me this big hug, and she said, thank you for doing that. It forced everybody to do the right thing. And starting this year, all the films will be in Arabic and Hebrew.
Hey, cool.
And we will have screenings in the Arab places around. And wow. You know, that was back then, it still is, but to stick your neck out on that issue, but you don't have to look at it that way. You can just say, just be yourself. So if you make a film and you get distribution, don't be afraid to ask for things. You'd be surprised you know, what you can get. And even if you have to take a little grief for it for a while, it has a chance of turning out okay.
And it helps if it's one of the greatest documentary films ever made. That, well, it gives you a little extra leverage too. But there's a million other ways to distribute a film if you don't get a distributor. I mean, for the first 10 years of our career, we would load a minivan up with 20,000 VHS tapes and like drive to college towns and screen films and like function like an indie rock band, you know? I mean, and that was one of the best ways to spend my 20s I can think of, you know.
And for all the things you'd say that we don't like about the new technology, that, you know, people tethered to their device, it has allowed people like you and Jeff and everybody else up here that nobody can stop your film from being seen. There's a way to put it up for people to see it and a way to people to talk about it. And you look at Barrick's film about the 27-year-old Michigander who got that ballot proposal on the ballot and got it passed. You know, that she had no experience of doing any of that. She was a student. And she put something up on Facebook and suddenly she had 1,000 likes. They have made a huge mistake putting the technology in the hands of everyone. The egalitarian nature of this could mean that your voice, his voice, your voices, all have a chance of being seen and heard by a wide audience. Make use of it. We have time for one last question and we got to go. Right there, yes sir, on the aisle. Just shout it out.
Thanks, congratulations, all of you doing all your great work. I have a question about distribution, and I know we're talking about film and theater and all the new technology and streaming and Amazon. Is there any, because I think there's a wider audience, and sometimes you must think we're just preaching to the choir. You do all this hard work, and then you go to little festival.
The choir needs a song to sing right now.
Right. But your work, I think there's a way wider audience, even if they don't agree with some things, that want to see intelligent, important, courageous, innovative work. Is there any hope for distribution through cable television? Sundance has 2 channels, and they don't even show movies, or they're Fast and Furious and MASH reruns. Independent Film Channel was a great channel when they started. They show Law and Order all day long. Logo's a channel for gay people. They have no original programming. All they show are Three's Company and Golden Girls 24 hours a day. Is it just money? Will these? There's got to be. Is there any way on cable television, maybe not 24 hours a day, for some of these great works, not only in America but around the world that are being done? There's got to be an audience, but is there any chance that that could ever make network, not network, but at least cable? Viceland does some things, and and PBS, of course, with Frontline. But is there any other chance that there'd be, with all these hundreds of channels on cable, that there's nothing on television that could show some of this great work? Thanks.
Well, Netflix and Hulu and Amazon are television. They're just the new television, and it's amazing how much resources they're putting into documentaries and how many docs you can now find on these streaming channels. You know, it's actually, we're really lucky that the streamers have come along. I mean, there's issues to resolve, but it's like they have, our students, we teach filmmaking, our students watch so many more documentaries now because of these streamers. So I think it's really healthy, actually.
I watch Netflix a lot, and the film, when we were speaking about how we can, where we want the film to be, and we were very curious about the festivals, the theaters, and we're trying to push as much as we can on like wide amount of theaters. But at the same time, like we will show the film on Channel 4 in UK and on Frontline PBS in US. The fact, I think, I don't know how as filmmakers, but as I've seen from my friends or people who I know, people are more just want the film to be in theaters, wants people to come to watch the film. In my situation, and I think, I don't know if that's all of you like agree with this or not, but I felt that I need people in their homes to see the film. And that's why I was like, yes, I want to on Channel 4. Yes, I want to on Frontline PBS. And I felt that this is just another chance and opportunity for other people to see the film. But I don't know if any one of you like disagree with this in your films to be on TV. We had a long discussion about
and actually,
this before.
one reason we went with Netflix with our new film is they told us, look, there's people in red states, deep red states, who wouldn't go to a movie theater to watch your movies, you know, knowing that we're commie pico leftists, but it's but they'll watch it at home.
Ohio.
They'll watch it at home in the privacy of their own home. And if you want your film to be watched by people who don't necessarily agree with you, the streamers is a good thing.
Cable will be dead within 5 years. The cable as we know it now. And Ira, the panel we did yesterday, I thought he made a great point. What may end up happening, because everybody's going to do streaming now starting next year, the networks are going to have their own streaming channels. Every studio will have their own. There'll be so much streaming, nobody's going to pay for all this. So there may be a flip that's going to take place where, like with the Movie Pass, which Ira said that's why we had the best documentary summer last year in forever, because young people have Movie Pass for $9.99 and go see as many movies as you want, and the younger generation loves the idea of a subscription service. Our movie theaters may end up, it may flip here, that we won't be streaming, you'll be paying for a show. You don't want all of Hulu, you just want The Handmaid's Tale. You don't want all of Amazon Prime, you want The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. So you'll pay a little tiny bit for those shows, everybody will do that. You'll pay it like a movie ticket. Our movie theaters will become subscription. And for $5 a month, you'll have a subscription to the State Theater. And most people they'll actually start to go to the movies more, knowing that they have this. Yeah. I bought that AMC pass. Anybody have that?
Yeah.
Like, at first I'm like, why am I, it's $19 a month. But you can see 3 movies a week. You can see up to 12 movies a month. If you actually go to just 2 movies a week, if you went to 1 movie a week, in New York City at least, that $19 is paid for with 1 movie. You know, that may be the way to go to save our theaters, and that people will start to see our movies more in theaters. So I don't know. That's my answer to that. And I want to thank Rick and Barrick and Julia, Joan, Wad, Steve, and Jeff for this panel. Go see their films here this week. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the Traverse City Film Festival.